Hey guys, I just want to walk you through a few of the highlights as we go through your tissue notes or your histology notes. Histo meaning tissue, ology being study of. So this is histology, the study of tissues, which is something you've not really done before, but it is extremely important in the real world. This is what doctors do when they take a biopsy or a little piece of a tumor or something like that to determine if it's cancerous or spreading or those kinds of things. I like this picture just because it's kind of funny and cute that you've got a heart out of your tissues, and you can see there's two tissue types in this picture. The purpler ones that are making the heart itself is one type of tissue, and then this out here is another type of tissue. The little dots, the little purple dots you see here, and the purple dots you see in all of these cells, that's the nucleus. So each little purple dot there is a different cell. Because remember, tissues are different cells working together. And so there are actually four different types of tissue. Epithelial tissue, which serves as a covering. Connective tissue, which is for support. Nervous tissue for control. And muscle for movement. And that's what these four pictures are that you can see. And then each of these pictures, you can see there's multiple cells working together to make a tissue. And these four types, these are your primary categories, and then within each category are more specific ones that we are going to look at. So today we will primarily focus on epithelial tissue. This is your epithelium. This serves as a lining, covering, and glandular tissue of the body. Anywhere you have a free body surface is where you have epithelial tissue. And what I mean by a free body surface means that you have cells that are not touching anything else on one side or any other cells. So example, your skin, this outer layer is an epithelial tissue because it's not touching anything else for your body. But same thing as the lining of the digestive tract, respiratory tract, blood vessels, those are all hollow tubes. So the inside layer of that tube, it's not touching any other cells. So therefore, that is an epithelial tissue. And again, different tissues make up these organs. So like for your stomach, the inside layer of your stomach, that is going to be an epithelial tissue. But you also have connective tissue for support. You have muscle tissue to move stuff, makes it mix and churn. So all of them work together to make those organs. So that inside part is your epithelial tissue. And the primary function of epithelial tissue, depending on what it looks like and where it's located, is either protection, absorption, filtration, or secretion. Some characteristics of epithelial tissue is that their cells are closely fit together. They have tight junctions between them, holding those cells tightly together. Like I said, they have one free edge, and then they'll have a basement membrane underneath giving it support. They are avascular. They don't have a blood supply. Avascular, A meaning absence or lack of, vascular being vessel. So there are no blood vessels here. No blood vessels means no blood supply. Which is helpful because that way you can scratch your leg or shave or something and not have blood coming out because you knocked off some of those cells. But even though it's avascular, it does still need nutrients. So this is where that diffusion comes in that we just talked about. The nutrients diffuse out of those capillaries into the tissue, and then even within the tissue will diffuse to lower concentration areas and up to these cells. And these cells do regenerate very easily. So like your skin, we need that as a boundary, and so it's going to regenerate very quickly. The way we name epithelial tissue, it gets a two-part name. It's like a first name and a last name. The first part we name by the number of layers. So if it's just one layer, we call it simple epithelium. If it just has one layer, that means stuff can kind of move through it pretty easily. So that's usually concerned with absorption, secretion, and filtration. Two or more layers, we call it stratified epithelium. And if I've got multiple layers, that's going to primarily be for protection. Like in your skin and your mouth, like you chew your food, you're going to knock some cells off, but that's okay because I've got multiple layers underneath. So that's the first part, simple or stratified, one layer or more than one. The second part of its name is based on its shape. So we have three options. The first one is squamous, which is flattened. I tend to say squished because I like that squamous and squished go together. Cuboidal is cubed, columnar is columns, so not too complicated there. So if I have a simple squamous tissue, simple tells me one layer, squamous tells me the cells are flattened, versus simple columnar is one layer and column-shaped cells. I can also have stratified squamous, stratified meaning multiple layers, and that the top layer is squished or flattened. Because if there are multiple layers, we name it by the top edge, that free edge, and we'll look at those as we go through. So starting with our simple squamous epithelial, simple being one layer, squamous meaning flattened. So I have one layer of flattened cells, and so this is usually where you have diffusion that happens pretty easily. Like you can see in this picture, if I have one layer of flat cells, it's going to be easy for gases to move through and nutrients and those kinds of things. So that's why you see this in your lungs and capillary walls. This picture, it's just from a top-down view, so that's why they look like flattened pancakes, but you can see through them. Simple cuboidal, simple meaning one layer, cuboidal meaning cubes. So I have one layer of cube-shaped cells. You don't have them in too many places in your body other than your glands and their duct. So you can see here's my free surface, and here's my cube shape, and a basement underneath. Simple columnar, this is a single layer, but simple, and your column-shaped cells. Commonly, these are some of your goblet cells that produce mucus, so you'll see them the entire length of your digestive tract. This is what produces that mucus to help everything go through your body. You also have linings, so all those body cavities we talked about, your thoracic cavity, abdominal cavity, there's a membrane covering each of those that have secretion so your organs don't rub against the wall of the cavity. And again, those are simple columnar. So I can see in this picture that if I look at the nucleus, I only have one layer of cells, and they are definite column-shaped cells as I look at them. This picture is from what we would look at in a microscope in class. But I can still see one layer of nuclei, and that these are column-shaped cells. Underneath, that's a different type of tissue, because remember, there are multiple tissues at work here, but it does have a free edge where it's not touching anything, so that's why this is an epithelial tissue. This is another picture of a simple columnar just along a blood vessel, which is a electron microscope picture, so I think it's pretty cool looking. Pseudo-stratified columnar. Pseudo means false. So these have falsely looked stratified. And if I look at this picture down here, I can see my nuclei, and then they kind of get jumbled up. So it's not one layer, but it's not definite layers either. So that's why we call it pseudo-stratified. It's falsely stratified. That's really the biggest thing you need to know about pseudo-stratified, is that it's a false stratified and that they're columnar. Because remember, this top layer has this column shape. So we'll name it by that top layer. Stratified squamous, this is a pretty common one. This is the most common stratified in the body, where you have a free edge, and you can see in this picture here, I have a free edge, but I have definite layers to my cells. So that's why it's a stratified squamous, because the top layer is squished. So stratified, multiple layers, squamous being squished. And this is really where you have a lot of abuse and friction. So like the outer layer of your skin, your mouth, esophagus, you've got food going, knocking off cells. But again, there's multiple layers here, so it's not a big deal. This is a picture of your epidermis. And you can see I have lots of different set layers. This is obviously those flattened outer layers, right? And then as you go down, I have more and more layers of similar cells. So this is that stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified cuboidal, stratified columnar are pretty rare in the body. We don't see these very much. They might even only be 2 layers thick, and there may be some of the ducts for some of your larger glands, but that's about it on those two. And then transitional epithelium, which is really probably my favorite epithelium, is pretty neat because this one actually stretches and changes shape. That's why we call it transitional. It can actually change shape. So this is in your urinary tract and organs and tissues that with lots of stretching. So like your bladder, when your bladder is empty, those cells are like nice and big and round. But then as your bladder gets full, those cells have to kind of start to flatten out. And as they flatten out, that's what allows your bladder to stretch and get bigger. And then when you use the restroom and empty your bladder, those cells go back to being round. So they actually change shape to allow for that stretching in your body. So I think they're really interesting. And this is a picture of them when they're not stretched. As you can see, they're nice rounded cells in this transitional epithelium. And so as the tissue expands, those cells will start to flatten out and they might look squamous. But then when, like I said, the structure goes back to its original shape, those cells do too and start to round back out. Last bit on epithelium is your glandular epithelium, and this is all your glands. And you actually have 2 types of glands. This is extremely important, so make sure you know these. Endocrine glands release secretions such as hormones into the blood supply, and then it goes floating around. So endocrine, these are your hormones. Exocrine means that the stuff they release goes through a duct. Kind of like your air duct, right? Your air conditioner makes the cold air and carries it through a duct to all the different rooms in your house. Well, same thing with your exocrine glands. They have a duct to carry it to somewhere else. So like your sweat glands produce sweat that goes through a duct to the surface of your skin. Your liver and pancreas produce enzymes, like digestive enzymes, that go through a duct into your intestine. So, and some organs do both. Right? So like your pancreas, for one, is exocrine because it produces digestive enzymes that go through a duct to the intestine, but it also produces insulin, which is a hormone that goes straight into the blood. So your pancreas can actually do both of them. But make sure you know the difference between endocrine and exocrine. And that is a picture for that. So I'm going to pause here so you can take a breather, and then we will move on to connective tissue.